So now that I've spent many hours with the Delta Force Alpha, I feel ready to discuss my thoughts on it. The first thing I want to do is properly set the stage for this game and give anyone watching this video the right kind of expectations before they end up trying it for themselves. Let's make something abundantly clear. This game is most definitely a blatant, utter knockoff of both Battlefield 2042 and Call of Duty smushed together. Notice I'm not saying inspired by those games. It is a straight up knockoff to the point that I would wager that when designing most of the systems in this game and the UI, they likely directly reference the other two games in their task tracking development systems. But I do want to add the caveat that I think there's something interesting about this approach. Call of Duty and Battlefield have struggled a lot over the last several years, and for every interesting, innovative feature they introduce, they make 2 or 3 more boneheaded decisions that drag down the gameplay experience. Whether it's predatory microtransaction practices, recycled content, oppressive engagement-based matchmaking systems, stripped away legacy features, or any more of the numerous sins committed by the developers of both Battlefield and Call of Duty. By contrast with Delta Force, Team Jade seems disinterested in reinventing the wheel, and instead taking things that work best about both franchises and plopping them into this game. To start things off, Havoc Warfare is directly a copy of 2042's Breakthrough mode. In a way, like 2042, this mode does a good job of keeping the action focused by breaking up the map into sectors and forcing players to operate within those specific sectors at a time. However, both Cracked and Ascension, the 2 maps offered during the alpha, are very poor for most of the sectors, featuring lackluster cover and poorly thought out routes for attackers, especially flankers, to take in order to break defensive positions. Attacking in this mode feels like a slog defined mostly by smoke spam combined with artillery call-ins to make any headway toward the objective. Couple this with movement speeds and mechanics that feel like they're taken straight from the Battlefield 3 era of FPS games, and it makes the maps feel very frustrating to play. Unless you play the D-Wolf Assault character, who has a tactical slide that can be cancelled, as well as a special ability that drastically improves his movement speed and heals him rapidly on each kill, which also adds time onto the ability's duration. He's basically a Call of Duty operator with an ability like Zane's passive in 2042. I just call him COD Guy. Unfortunately, COD Guy's sliding and mobility feels like the way the game is meant to be played, to the point that using any other character is very sluggish, and I often avoid them altogether because of this. The sliding should most definitely be added to all characters, along with a slight boost to base movement speed. On top of that mobility change, mantling desperately needs improvement. As is, it's among the worst I've seen in a game of this caliber, which is made more frustrating by how heavily the map design focuses on uneven terrain and high rocks that players will need to traverse in order to reach campers, but without things like grapple hooks or zip lines to streamline that process. I'm really reminded of the first Warzone when climbing steep rock faces, where the character couldn't grab waist-high ledges or would climb and immediately slide down. It's almost exactly the same here, but there's little way to avoid engaging with this if you want to actually take out campers abusing the elevation. Defense also feels like a rather brainless endeavor, with maps having such oddly placed boundaries and no real direction or flow to them. It just feels like you camp back and farm kills until the enemy slowly pushes up, then everyone starts converging right on top of the objectives for a cluster of chaotic fighting. The dissatisfaction is compounded by the vehicles. By the time the armored vehicles show up, they often become very oppressive. The engineer character isn't nearly as good as the medic and assault characters, so it's difficult to convince anyone to switch to that class to take vehicles out. Plus, the vehicles have a shocking amount of freedom to get to places that feel like they shouldn't be able to access. One of the sectors of Ascension really suffers from this tremendously. In general, I would actually compare the vehicle roles in this game, at least in the Breakthrough style mode, more closely to World War III than I would Battlefield. I've also seen reports all over social media that some of the players in a match that have TTV names are likely AI bots. And while I haven't seen conclusive proof of this, I have to agree based on my experience and observation of their behaviors. They just have all of the hallmarks of AI from both DMZ and 2042. The biggest being they're either oddly standing in the open, shooting with the worst accuracy imaginable at an enemy really far away, or they're laser beaming you through smoke from 80 meters away as soon as you peek your head out. It makes the experience a little odd at times. I'm not sure why they're doing this, but I wish they'd be a little bit more transparent about it and not try to hide these AI bots behind player names and pretend they're real. All of this said though, there are things I absolutely love so far about playing Delta Force, to the point that I've been grinding it for hours every day and enjoying my time. It's crazy to say that when for the last several months I've spent my time abandoning FPS altogether and returning to League of Legends and StarCraft 2 in order to escape the boredom. but I have to admit that Delta Force has reinvigorated my FPS interest. To start with the good, they basically took Call of Duty's gunsmith system and put it on steroids. There's so much customization here and depth that I've literally spent hours exploring all the attachments and combining different things, going to the gun range, and going back and making new loadouts. Plus, they actually include detailed stats about the guns and explanations about what every statistic does. It's truly astonishing and is honestly a triumph. Gunplay also puts 2042 to shame and pretty much directly emulates the gunplay from Call of Duty, but with improvements. Where Call of Duty loves to add visual clutter like extreme visual recoil, weapon shake, screen shake, and muzzle smoke, Delta Force tones all of that down to a reasonable level, but retains the punchiness and unique identity from gun to gun. They also bring over the very smooth and clean animations famous in Modern Warfare, and they're equally effective here, building an immersive and cinematic experience when interacting with these guns. I'll also add to that they've mostly struck a nice balance between ease of use and skill with guns that doesn't feel like it strays too far on either side. Plus, there's over 40 guns available in the alpha, and I assume more at launch and likely even more added via the live service, which is yet another thing working in this game's favor. They also brought in a system very similar to Battlefield 5's call-ins, where you can call in a cruise missile, an artillery strike, a smoke barrage, or even have a vehicle called in. I love the idea here, though so far it feels a little lackluster and could probably use a slight boost in power to make it more viable. And while I complained about the gameplay design on the maps, I will say the art direction is quite good and really evokes a grittier, more grounded style that aligns with what military fans expect. In general, the visual fidelity of the game is very impressive, especially for how well it runs. Performance is downright shocking, even when maxed out. Frame rates are high, and I haven't had a single crash or truly game-breaking bug. There are some small things, a bit of server performance issues here and there. There's a bug where you lose the ability to ADS until you die, occasional audio bugs when loading into the game that are generally resolved when the match starts, but I can count on my hands the amount of times I've run into bugs like this. We're talking about an alpha. While I still don't like the inclusion of specialists in the Havoc Warfare mode, I find them far less intrusive than they are in 2042. We don't have automated turrets doing chip damage or wingsuits flying characters across the map. There's still some cheese like armor plates and a wall hack arrow, but they are far less frequent and don't stifle the core gunplay experience as much. Team Jade is also doing the right thing from the start and locking some weapons to classes. There are also some sections of the maps that play pretty well and really show the potential of close quarters fighting with decent mobility. The Cave in Ascension has had some good fights, as well as the final sector of Cracked, and hopefully we see them lean a little bit more into that type of design rather than the overly open areas with way too many sightlines and elevation differences. Finally, there's the Extraction mode, which I believe they're calling Tactical Turmoil. I don't have quite as much time in this mode, but from what I've played, it feels like it straddles a very fine line between DMZ and more hardcore games like Tarkov or Gray Zone Warfare. And while in the past I've criticized games that don't choose a distinct identity, I actually think this game is doing a really good job. I love that there are some very streamlined elements of those more hardcore shooters that often just feel tedious, while still maintaining the more detailed inventory systems and the stakes of losing your gear when dropping in. I'm not the biggest extraction shooter player, but from the time I've dabbled in this mode, I'd say it's actually a very solid experience compared to others on the market that once again takes an if it ain't broke, don't fix it approach. That about sums up my overall thoughts at the moment of Delta Force. I'm sure there's more to say, and maybe I'll make more videos in the future as the playtest continues to unfold and I have more thoughts, but generally speaking, I'm very impressed by the foundations this game has, and I'd say if it looks at all interesting to you, I'd give it a shot whenever you have the opportunity. While I don't agree with every decision made here, it truly feels like the developers are putting fun first, and it feels like their intentions are earnest. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Are you going to be trying Delta Force out? If you have, what do you think of it? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And with that, thank you for watching. Leave a like or a dislike. I'll see you all in the next video.